What is up, guys? We are back. It's your boy Effie with Any Action Sportscast, here to go over UFC 305, Israel Adesanya versus DRICUS Du Plessis. We are finally going to find out who's the realest African in the UFC, and I can't wait, man. I am stoked for this card. There is nothing but bangers all over this main card, man. We have Kaya France taking on Steve Erceg. We have Dan Hooker taking on Mateusz Gamrot. We have Tuivasa taking on Biggie Boy. I mean, this whole card has bangers, man, and I can't wait. I'm super pumped. We also have ADCC going down in Las Vegas this weekend, and we also have the $1 million Craig Jones Invitational going down as well in Las Vegas this Friday and Saturday. So if you're a combat sports fan, man, this is a great weekend up ahead. So yeah, man, we're coming off a week where our picks went 8-2 out of 10 fights, and we did lose a quarter unit of profit, pretty much broke even. So hopefully we can pick some winners and win our bets this week in what should be a really good night of fights. So without any further ado, let's get right into the fights. And in the main event, we have DRICUS still knocks Du Plessis looking to defend his middleweight title against Israel, the style bender Adesanya. DRICUS comes in the champion with a 21-2 record, and he is currently the underdog at plus 105. While Israel Adesanya comes in, the challenger trying to get his belt back, comes in with a 24-3 record, currently minus 125 on the money line. Now, straight away, right off the bat, guys, I have a bet on this fight. I have a 1-unit bet on DRICUS Du Plessis at plus 100 even money. So right here, you can see a little bit better odds at ESPN Bet. But for me, my book had it at plus 100, and I feel like DRICUS Du Plessis will close as the favorite, or at least close as a pick'em in this fight. So I wanted to get, the line while I could. And yeah, man, I laid 1 unit on DRICUS Du Plessis to win this fight. And nothing against Adesanya, man. I really like him as a fighter. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. I really think that a lot of people are going to be missing him when he does leave the UFC. He was a very active champion. The guy's been in nothing but title fights for recently, 3-4 years now, it feels like. And he's a very skilled fighter, man. And I do have a feeling that if I do lose this bet, Israel might make it look super easy, because DRICUS Du Plessis just bum rushes forward, man. You want to talk about who's the cleaner, crisper, more technical striker? It's definitely not DRICUS. It's obviously Israel Adesanya. I mean, he is a sniper from the outside, but he is coming off a very long layoff, which I do not like for him in this fight. And in his last fight, he looked horrible against Sean Strickland. Now, granted, Sean Strickland's forward pressure and his ability to not get hit, in my opinion, is what really helped him in that fight. And DRICUS is the opposite of that. I mean, he does go forward, don't get me wrong, but he is quite hittable, man. This guy throws wide shots, but it works for him, man. It's not the prettiest, I will say for sure, it's not the prettiest striking you'll ever see, but it works for him, man. And it's funny because earlier in his UFC career, you could argue that he was getting extremely tired after 5 minutes, and this is a 25-minute fight, and against Strickland, that was the very first time he's ever gone 25 minutes, but since then, I think it was after the Brunson fight, which he won, he had nose surgery. So he was saying that he was only breathing 30% of what he could through his nose or something crazy like that. And they got nose surgery like Justin Gaethje. And now he's, back totally fine. And the cardio is good, which, I mean, it did look good against Strickland. And his ability to use the grappling really secured him that fight, in my opinion. And that's one of the reasons why I really like him in this fight. On the feet, obviously, I think that Israel Adesanya will be looking to counter-strike here. And we've seen DRICUS Du Plessis hit clean multiple times in the UFC, getting countered, rushing in recklessly, right? So clearly that's what Adesanya is going to want to do. But man, if you look at Adesanya, to me, he's also someone, and I feel like people don't say this often, who is quite hittable as well, man. I think that if someone like DRICUS Du Plessis lands on Adesanya, he's going to put him down. I mean, we saw, the jab merchant, the decision merchant, Sean Strickland drop and hurt Israel Adesanya, and that's never a good look. So, man, to me, the X factor for Israel Adesanya will be that lateral movement, will be the beginning of this fight. I want to see how Israel Adesanya attacks that lead leg of DRICUS Du Plessis. Israel has some of the best low leg kicks that you'll see in the UFC, and I really think that it's going to immobilize DRICUS here early in this fight. But I also want to see how quickly DRICUS decides to go to the grappling, man. Hopefully he doesn't walk into this fight with a huge ego, trying to prove something and outstrike Israel Adesanya on the feet. Because I do think that for most of the time that they're on the feet, he will be the one going forward. He'll be the one pressuring Adesanya on his back foot. But Adesanya is totally comfortable in that realm, man. We saw him counterpunch, Paulo Costa knock him out. We saw him counterpunch, Robert Whittaker and knock him out. But we've also seen him give up, takedowns to people like Robert Whittaker as well and Marvin Vettori. And I feel like this is the first fighter he's fought in a very long time that can really hurt him bad with the grappling. I feel like DRICUS has the strength, the takedown techniques, and just the speed and effectiveness on his takedowns to really put Adesanya down on his back and really work him from there. I think this is the first time we'll see Adesanya spend multiple extended minutes on the ground with his shoulders pinned on the mat and not being able to get up from someone like DRICUS Du Plessis. I really want to see how early DRICUS decides to go to those takedowns in this fight, because in the Sean Strickland fight, I mean, you listen to DRICUS talk about it himself, man. He came out and he was getting jabbed by Sean Strickland, and he, felt no power. He felt no threat, really. But even then, his face got marked up early in that fight. And after round one, DRICUS's eyeball was swollen, man. And DRICUS himself said so. He didn't account for that. He didn't really think that he was going to get damaged like that off of the jabs from Sean Strickland. And from there, he really implemented his game plan. And I do think that DRICUS won that fight against Strickland. I know a lot of people don't, but I think that it's the champion's time, man. I think it's still here for DRICUS Du Plessis in this fight, and it comes down to, I think he can hurt Adesanya on the feet. I do think that Adesanya is quite hittable on the feet as well, and I think that he will be able to grapple in this fight. I do give him a very big grappling advantage in this fight. While Adesanya, is coming off a very long layoff. He's 35 years old. We know about the curse with guys that are 35 in title fights. The odds are not in their favor. And while I do think he's a very dangerous and very accurate counter striker, which will definitely help him in this fight, I feel like DRICUS just has enough to win this fight. So at plus 100, I laid one unit on him to win one, and I feel confident, man. So give me DRICUS Du Plessis to win this fight, and I actually think that he submits Israel Adesanya in that third or fourth round. And up next is an absolute banger of a fight in the co-main event. We have Kaya France taking on Steve Erceg. We have Kaya France coming in with a 24-11 record. He is currently plus 135 on the money line, while Steve Erceg comes in with a 12-2 record, and he is currently minus 160 on the money line. Now, Erceg will be the taller guy in this fight with the 4-inch height advantage, but he is at a reach disadvantage with the shorter guy, Kaya France, having the reach advantage in this fight. And this is going to be a banger, man. I really don't foresee any grappling in this fight. If there are grappling exchanges, I do think that Steve Erceg will be the one getting the better of them. I do think that he has the better scrambles in this fight, the better takedowns in this fight, and the better top control in this fight as well, the better submission threats in this fight. Just overall grappling in general, I do lean Erceg in this fight. He's a very active grappler, especially before the UFC. But in the UFC, man, he surprised me, man. I'll be honest, I thought he was going to lose to Dvorak. I picked against him in that fight, and he came out and he impressed me, man. That was a great fight. He obviously got the knockout against Matt Schnell, and to get a title fight after only 3 fights was actually kind of crazy, man. And he gave Pantoja, the champion, a good fight, man. And Steve Erceg's last fight, it was 2-2 going into that 5th round, in my opinion. He actually got a really good takedown in that 5th round, got reversed. And Pantoja just took him down over and over and over again in that fight, which is obviously not, something that Steve Erceg is going to have to worry about in this fight against someone like Kaya France. It's going to be a fight on the feet, and it's going to be close, man. So earlier, I got to talk about this. Earlier in the week, Steve Erceg was around minus 200, minus 210. He was up there in the minus 200s, right? So money's coming in on Kaya France, pushing Steve Erceg down to minus 160, and that's actually where I thought he would be lined. I thought when I did this tape, I was like, all right, cool. I'm leaning Steve Erceg. Hopefully they give me a good line. And I was hoping for a minus 160, minus 175 or less, line. And I look, and it's minus 230, and I was like, whoa, what is going on? I was definitely against that line. I did not think that was accurate. I thought that was a bit wide for Steve Erceg, in my opinion, who should be the rightful favorite. But not minus 230, not minus 200. So to see money coming in on Kaya France, pushing this down to minus 160, I feel way better about laying that. Hopefully we can get a minus 150 here on Steve Erceg and lay 1.5 units on him to win one. But in my opinion, I do think it's going to go all 3 rounds. I think it's going to go to decision. So if I were to bet Steve Erceg, I would really like to bet him to win via decision. But it's going to be tough, man, because on the other side, we have Kaya France, man. He comes in with a 24-11 record, and this dude is a bulldog, man. In his last fight, he got totally screwed. I thought he won against Amir Albazi. If you watch that 5th round on the live screen, it comes up. He was minus 400 during that 5th round. In my opinion, the books, and me as well, thought that he was up 3-1. And really the only round that was significantly, clearly not his round was round 3, where he got taken down and pretty much dominated by Amir Albazi. I think Amir Albazi, showed that he was obviously a very good grappler. But while I was on the feet, man, Kaya France was landing big time with those jabs. His jab was landing at will in his most recent fight. But one thing I like about Kaya France is his overhand, man. He has a really good overhand right, and that actually might get to Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg likes to pull his head back, has a tall man defense at times, and goes back in a linear straight line when he's avoiding strikes. And I feel like Kaya France can pressure him into that punch. So that might be there for him in this fight. And like I said, I do expect this to be a 15-minute striking fight. I don't foresee Kaya France implementing any sort of takedowns in this fight. And if Steve Erceg decides to take down, or at least attempt Kaya France in this fight, Kaya France has proven in the UFC to have very good takedown defense and to have very good, awareness when he is getting taken down. In that third round against Amir Albazi, man, he was in deep in a rear naked choke, man. That elbow was tight. He had Amir Albazi had the body triangle, and like 10 seconds later, he's chucking him off his back, getting top position against someone like Amir Albazi. So I trust Kai France's, defensive submission defense to, hold intact here and not get submitted by Steve Erceg. I do think this is going to go all 15, minutes in this fight. I do like the overs. And I like the fight to go the distance. So I think it's going to be close. I do agree with the line movement coming in on, Kai France. But ultimately, I am going to go with the favorite. I'm going with Astro Boy to win this fight. And I just can't wait for this, my man, because this is going to be a great fight. Let's go Astro Boy. I'm going to go Steve Erceg via decision. Up next, we have another banger, man. And this time in the lightweight division, we have Mateusz Gamrot taking on Dan Hooker. Gamrot comes in with a 24-2 record. He is currently minus 340 on the money line, while Dan Hooker comes in with a 23-12 record, and he is currently plus 260. So straight away, before I even talk about this fight, that line is absolutely insane to me. Mateusz Gamrot gets dropped all the time in his fights. I believe in his last 5 fights, he's been dropped 4 times, and the only time he wasn't dropped was a fight that he probably would have gotten dropped if the other opponent, didn't get injured in Rafael Fiziev. And I've bet against Mateusz Gamrot before, man. He's cost me before. Like, I had Fiziev in that fight. Obviously, Fiziev gets injured. I had Arman Tarzuki in their fight as well, and I thought that Arman won that fight. The decision went to Gamrot. But the thing about Gamrot, which will really hurt Dan Hooker in this fight, is the grappling, man. That's one thing you need to know about this guy. This guy is a relentless grappler. If he doesn't get the first shot, he will chain wrestle into the next one. If he doesn't get that, he's going to the next one. He is trying to grab you, man. He is trying to close his hands, lock his hands on you, and if he can get his hands wrapped around your waist and lock those hands, man, you're not getting them off, man. This guy is a legit grappler. Honestly, like, I would love to see him fight Islam because the grappling exchanges in that fight, which would just be so sick. The Arman Tarzuki fight, man, the grappling exchanges in that fight were so sick. But on the feet, man, he is not the best fighter. Like, he is clearly the worst striker in this fight. Which brings me to Dan Hooker, man. For any minute that the fight's on the feet, it's going to be going Dan Hooker's way, man. Dan Hooker has all the finishing upside in this fight, especially on the feet. He can knock out Mateusz Gamrot at any moment in this fight. Every single round starts on their feet. But I just feel like the forward pressure and the forward, the pace of Gamrot on Dan Hooker will be too much. I think it's going to be the type of fight where Dan Hooker is looking good at moments at range, but then eventually does get shot on, get grabbed, and has to spend the rest of the round essentially, defending and trying to get up. But one thing I will say going in Dan Hooker's favor is that he does his camp with his wrestling coach, Frank Hickman, right? So Frank Hickman is also Volkanovski's coach. Frank Hickman is really close with Craig Jones. Craig Jones and Frank had Volk ready against Islam, man. If you watch those fights against Islam, well, the first one really because he got knocked down in the second, but that first fight against Islam, man, they had him prepared, man. He was defending a ton of situations well, breaking the hands, getting off the cage, getting up, not getting, mounted. And he was safe, man. So they've planned for guys like this. Like Frank Hickman, I know Craig Jones isn't with Dan Hooker for this camp, but Frank Hickman is, and that's a good coach to have in this type of fight because he's a great wrestler, a great wrestling coach, and they've seen this style of fighter, opponent, I should say, in their camp, man. So I really do think that Frank Hickman should, in theory, have Dan Hooker prepared for this fight. But we've seen Dan Hooker, at times get taken down and then get submitted, not have the best submission defense. The Kimura against Islam really worries me because I do think that Mateusz can get to the top here. I think he can get to mount in this fight. And if he gets to mount, I can see a head and arm choke from Mateusz or even a Kimura attempt from side control. So, man, just the grappling, the overall relentlessness of the grappling from Gamrot is just too much, in my opinion, to pick or bet on Dan Hooker. But I definitely disagree with that line. At minus 340, like, Gamrot cannot afford to get hurt, and he gets hurt all the time, man. I think Dan Hooker is super live in this fight. It's in his hometown. It's in his home country. Gamrot's the one flying over from Florida. We're in Dan Hooker's backyard. The crowd's going to be on his side. He's going to be hype. He's going to be ready. Give me Mateusz Gamrot to win via decision, but this is a dog or a pass as far as the betting line for me. And up next, we have a heavyweight swanging bang type of fight. We have Tai Tuivasa taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Tai Tuivasa comes in with a 15-7 record, currently plus 180 on the money line, while biggie boy Jairzinho Rozenstruik comes in with a 14-5 record, currently minus 220. Now again, man, so when I look at some fights, man, I watch one guy, I watch the next guy, and then I'm like, all right, cool, like this is who I like, right? And then I see the lines. I never try to see the lines before I watch the tape or I study the fights, And when I saw this one, I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, minus 220 for Rozenstruik. I mean, I get it. Tai Tuivasa has fallen on some rough times, man. 4 fights in a row, been submitted twice, been knocked out twice, getting finished 4 straight times. If he loses this fight, in all reality, he's probably going to get finished 5 straight times in the UFC. And if you go back and look at his wins, man, they're not the best wins. They're not aging the best. I mean, Derek Lewis is, but other than that, man, Augusta Sakai, a lot of these guys are out of the UFC that Tai Tuivasa was finishing, while Jairzinho, he's like a mid-level fighter, man. He's like he's a top 10 fighter in the heavyweight division, but he's more like 5 to 10, maybe even lower. But he is a dangerous kickboxer. He is a dangerous striker, heavy hands. And we've seen him get finished. We've seen him get submitted. But neither guy, that seems to be a little bit of a kryptonite for both these guys. They obviously want to keep it on the feet. They obviously don't have the best defensive grappling, in the heavyweight division. But they won't have to worry about in this fight. Both of them are going to stand and bang. Both of them are going to throw down. And I wonder who is going to have the better leg kicks in this fight. Is it going to be Tai Tuivasa chopping down Jairzinho, or is Jairzinho going to be the one chopping down Tai Tuivasa's lead leg? Because whoever lands those first, I feel like are really going to damage the other guy and really limit their movement. And from there they can really stock down the hurt opponent. So, man, this is one of those fights where it's a volatile, sloppy heavyweight fight. If Tai Tuivasa lands something in a crazy exchange, that wouldn't shock me at all. He has really close, really crisp, short strikes. I mean, he was very close to finishing Ciryl Gane while Ciryl Gane was putting it on Tai Tuivasa. So he's just one of those guys where you keep putting him out, rocking him. He's doing the chicken dance and he's almost out. And then out of nowhere, he could counterpunch you, and he's the one, that knocks you out, hurts you, and, wins the fight. So it's just a really volatile fight. It could go either way. At any moment, Tai Tuivasa can knock out Jairzinho. At any moment, Jairzinho can knock out Tai Tuivasa. This is a fan-friendly fight. But I'm going with the favorite. I'm going with Jairzinho Rozenstruik in this fight because I do think he's a little bit quicker to the punch. I do like his footwork a little bit more, and I do like the speed on his strikes a little bit more. But again, we're going with someone that's fighting the hometown guy. I'm picking another Australian to lose their fight. It's always tough when you're picking against the hometown fighters because they seem to always show out when the UFC goes to that part of the world. But Tai Tuivasa has been training in Abu Dhabi. He's not really training at City Kickboxing or anywhere like that. It's tough, man. Minus 220. Again, I don't really agree. I think that's a little bit wide. I'd rather lay there's Jairzinho inside the distance. So give me Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Give me Jairzinho Rozenstruik round 1 knockout. And up next, we have the return of the Leech. We have Jingliang taking on Carlos Prates. The Leech comes in with a 19-8 record, currently plus 275, while Carlos Prates comes in with a 19-6 record, currently minus 370. Now, I'm sounding like a broken record, but again, man, a favorite that I think is going to win, but another line where I'm like, whoa, what are we doing? How is this possible? How is Carlos Prates minus 370? If you think that he is minus 370 in this fight, you're basically saying that the Leech is totally and completely washed. So let's start with the Chinese fighter on the left side of the screen, the Leech. First of all, I don't think he's completely washed, and I don't think that line is justified. He's a very good striker, so what he can do in this fight is he can implement the clinch. I feel like if he tries to grapple Prates and slow him down and extend him in this fight, we can see Carlos Prates start to fade. Yes, I understand Carlos Prates is a very dangerous striker. At any moment, he can finish the Leech, but it's kind of interesting, man. The Leech has, 27 professional fights. He's never been knocked out in the UFC. I don't think he's ever been dropped. I think he's been dropped, but it was like 6 years ago, right? And he's very durable. He is, though, coming off a loss to Daniel Rodriguez, and then he took a very long layoff. So now this is his return fight. I believe he had back surgery, which is a huge red flag to me. But this is his return fight after a very long layoff, a very significant injury. And he's coming off a fight where he did lose to Daniel Rodriguez, and Daniel Rodriguez doesn't have, the threat on the feet as significant as Prates does, you could say, but he does have the volume. He does have, the output, whereas Prates doesn't have that volume, in my opinion, but he does have that one-touch power. He does have the ability to work the body in this fight, and Carlos Prates is a dangerous striker. So on the right side of the screen, the reason why he's the Brazilian right here on the screen is minus 370 is because the finishing ability, man. This guy is finishing all of his wins in the very first round, if not the very second round. I mean, this guy is putting dudes out. We just saw him, against Chuck Buffalo, and he buried him with a body shot. Very nice. And he's just knocking pretty much all of his opponents out. But this is definitely going to be the best opponent he's ever faced, especially in the UFC. So it's definitely a step up in competition. He's flying all over the world to, was it Perth, Australia in this fight. Fighting a guy who has way more UFC experience in this fight. But I do ultimately have to pick Prates in this fight. I think he wins this fight via decision, but man, if he fades in that third round and the leech is still there, pushing the pace, getting that pressure, getting him backed up along the warning track, it could look ugly for Prates in that third round. So give me Prates to win via decision. I do think he's going to land damage, in those first 2 rounds and then coast in the third. I wouldn't be shocked totally if the leech does get finished for the first time in the UFC and gets knocked out. We've seen him get choked by Khamzat Chimaev, but I don't think that Prates is going to implement any grappling in this fight. I believe that this fight will be a 50-minute striking fight, and in that case, I got to go with the guy I think is a little bit quicker, a little bit sharper, and has way more power. So give me Prates to win that fight via decision. And in the featured prelim, we have a sloppy heavyweight fight, guys. We have Junior Tafa taking on Valter Walker. We have Tafa coming in with a 5-2 record, currently minus 130 on the money line, while Valter Walker comes in with an 11-1 record, currently plus 110 on the money line. Now, I am going with the underdog Valter Walker in this fight, and it basically comes down to, do I think that he's going to be able to get down Tafa and then hold him? Hold him down, I should say, because I don't think Tafa can get up. I think if Tafa gets taken down by Walker in this fight, I just don't think he's going to get up. We've seen him and his brother show very bad grappling, defense in their fights. For some reason, they're just very dangerous kickboxers and just never really improve their grappling area, which is totally fine and understandable, man. You want to be an entertaining fighter. And these guys come to swing and bang, man. The Tafa brothers are legit strikers, very good kicks, even though we saw in his last fight, Junior Tafa get his lead leg kicked kind of off by Lima. But I don't think he's going to have to worry about that with Walker. Walker, the brother of Johnny Walker here, kind of fights the opposite. This guy is a slow, sloppy heavyweight. Man, just a sloppy fight. I don't want to spend too much time on this fight because I know I'm not going to bet this fight, but I am going to pick Valter Walker to win that fight. If Tafa, knocks him out, I wouldn't be shocked. We saw, Walker, completely fail in his last fight against Bresh. He came in as a huge favorite and lost. And he's not the best fighter, but I'll be honest. I think the UFC is kind of doing Tafa a favor in this fight. We saw Tafa step in on short notice against Lima. He did get finished in that fight. Yeah, he was actually replacing his brother, who I forget what was wrong with him. He might have had an injury or something. And then his brother, who wasn't even in camp or anything, steps in and takes that fight. So I know the UFC really liked that. Now they have him fighting in Perth, in Australia, in his home country. And they're giving him a guy who is basically just a giant, fat grappler trying to lay on you in the heavyweight division. So I don't rate Valter Walker very highly. It's always bad when I'm picking a guy who I don't think is very good and who I do think is the worst overall MMA fighter, but I'm going to do it in this fight just for the fact that I don't think Tafa can get up if he gets taken down. Every single round starts on the feet, so for about 45 seconds in every round, I think that Tafa's live for a knockout, but I do expect a lot of cage pushing in this fight. I expect a lot of clinch from Walker in this fight, and I do think that once he gets in the clinch, he's going to be able to, get Tafa off balance and put him down. So give me Walker actually via decision, if not late finish, but I am going to go with Walker decision. And I actually kind of hope I'm wrong, because if it is a Walker decision, then it's probably going to be a very boring fight. Ooh, and up next is a very good fight. We have Josh Culibao taking on Ricardo Ramos. We have Culibao coming in as a minus 150 favorite, while Ramos comes in as a plus 125 underdog. Now, this fight, I don't want to say it's a striker versus grappler, typical, if the guy gets him down, he's going to choke him, or like if the guy doesn't take him down, he's going to get lit up on the feet. I do give the grappling advantage here to Ramos. We've seen his ability to take the back multiple times in the UFC. He's a very good back take. And on the feet, he's not the best. I do expect Josh to be the better striker in this fight. I actually kind of feel like I know he's going to be the better striker in this fight. But we've seen, what I really don't like from Ramos is we've seen him sort of give up on himself, and we've seen his cardio not be the best. Man, he's getting finished quite frequently in the UFC. And I don't want to question the heart of the guy, but I think it's questionable, man. I feel like if things don't go his way, he's going to check out, and I want to be shocked to see him pull guard in this fight at some point if he is getting rocked by Josh Culibao in this fight. But basically, to me, this fight comes down to Josh Culibao has to defend the takedowns. He has to get separation in this fight, and from there, he has to have enough output to really hurt Ricardo Ramos. I do think that the likelihood of Josh hurting Ramos in this fight is pretty high, but I do worry that Ricardo Ramos is just going to have a relentless game plan where he's just shooting, Culibao up, failing on the takedowns, but still getting him up against the cage, and from there really limiting the output that Culibao can put, and making Josh really have to burst when they are in, those once they do get separated after the clinch. So I don't know. It's a hard fight to call. It's one of my lower level confidence picks, you could say, but I am going to go with a favorite. I'm going with Culibao in this fight, just with the fact that I think that he can defend those takedowns, stay safe if he does get taken down, come back up, work to his feet, and then from there be the better striker, have more output, more damage on his shots, and not be the guy giving up on himself with no bad cardio. So give me Culibao to win that fight. Give me Culibao to win via decision. Oh, and this is a very interesting fight, guys. We have a women's fight between Casey O'Neill and Luana Santos. Casey O'Neill comes in with a 9-2 record, currently plus 130 on the money line, while Luana Santos comes in with an 8-1 record, currently minus 155. So for this fight, I'm going with Luana Santos, and I know I kind of put myself in a pickle here because in Luana Santos' last fight, she fought Maria Agapova, and I actually bet on Maria Agapova. I picked Maria Agapova, and that was a tough look because Santos lost 0 seconds of that fight. She came out like a train and just ran it through Agapova, man. It was crazy, and she worked her, man. She looked like $1 million. I'll give her that. And so here, it's like Casey O'Neill is definitely better than Agapova, right? She's clearly a better fighter pretty much everywhere, but I'm not picking her against Santos. Now, you would think if I get a better, I already picked, against Santos with a horrible fighter. Now I'm getting a better fighter, and I'm not going to pick with her. Like, what are we doing? I'm picking Santos because I am a believer now. She's proven to me, I should say, that she is legit. One thing that I do think is a huge X factor in this fight is Luana Santos' judo. She has very good judo throws, but her top control isn't the best. We've seen her throw, people like Stephanie Egger and then get reversed. We've seen her get throws and then end up on bottom, which is never good. You never want to overthrow someone, and then end up on bottom. But she has that body awareness, that weight awareness, where to, have your grips, where to have your over underhooks. Like, she's very good in the clinch, and that's why I really like it women's MMA. If you can have someone who has a judo advantage in women's MMA, most of the time I feel like you have to go with them because a lot of these fights are taking place in the clinch, man. A lot of minutes in this fight I expect to be in the clinch. I don't think that Casey O'Neill is a better striker in this fight. I think that Luana Santos has more output and more power on her shots, or not more output, but she definitely has more power on her shots, where Casey O'Neill has more output with less power. But I do think that Casey O'Neill does have enough defensive grappling to not get submitted here instantly like she did against Lipsky. I do think that she has enough scrambling ability to make this interesting, and if she does get top control, I do think that she might have some success, holding down Santos. But ultimately, I do think that Santos' clinch, her judo, her offensive jiu-jitsu, and her power on her feet will be enough to win this fight. I will say, though, she is on short notice, so she beat Agapova, who I also believe was on short notice, and flying all the way to Perth, Australia. She was training at the UFC PI, and it's a big step up to fly across the world and have to fight in Perth, Australia against someone from that part of the world. So another fighter from that part of the world that I'm going to pick against. So give me Luana Santos to win this fight. Give me her to win via decision, if not ground and pound finish in that third round. But I am going to lean towards decision. Luana Santos, give me her to win. And oh my God, look at this line. Up next, we have Jack Jenkins taking on Herbert Burns. Jack Jenkins comes in with a 12-3 record, currently minus 900 on the money line, while Herbert Burns comes in with an 11-5 record, currently plus 525, which is absolutely crazy, right? Minus 1100 in the UFC, anything can happen, man. Jack Jenkins could roll his ankle, right when the fight starts, and you never know, you could lose your bet that way. So, minus 900, you gotta pretty much know you're gonna decapitate the guy. I think that Herbert Burns, it's pretty obvious at this point. He's round 1 or bust, maybe even round 2 or bust, but this guy definitely doesn't have enough, cardio or heart to make it, 15 minutes in the UFC. I feel like Jack Jenkins is gonna kick this dude's leg off. I think that he's gonna finish this fight. I think he's gonna win in the second round via knockout. Not gonna spend too much time, because if Herbert Burns doesn't submit Jack Jenkins in this fight in that very first round, and if not in the second round, he's gonna lose this fight no matter what. Like, I don't care what anyone says. I can see Herbert Burns, pulling guard in this fight, like we've seen him do in the UFC. But Jack Jenkins, man, it's simple. You can't go to the floor with this guy. You can't give Herbert Burns his best chance to win. You have to keep this guy on the feet, and from there, pick him apart. I do think that Jack Jenkins is clearly the better striker in this fight. If you're going to bet on anything, I would bet Jack Jenkins round 2. Just because I think that Herbert Burns has enough to at least last one round. But I wouldn't be shocked if he gets knocked out in that very first round. So give me Jack Jenkins via knockout round 2. And up next, we have Tom Nolan taking on Alex Reyes. Tom Nolan comes in with a 7-1 record, currently minus 1150 on the money line. Oh my God. While Alex Reyes comes in with a 13-4 record, currently plus 650. And I'll keep this one super sweet. In this fight, you have a huge favorite in Tom Nolan, who's minus 1100, right? But it's not like we haven't seen him vulnerable in the UFC. We've seen him hurt. We've seen him put on his back. We've seen him get clipped in his fight. So that's definitely worrisome. You would think that someone that warrants that type of money line is someone that looks like a beast, like someone that looks like a future champion, which I don't think that's Tom Nolan. I don't think that he's that good of a fighter. But that's where Alex Reyes comes in. So it's like, how you got to think of a book. Like, how can you justify laying this line? Like, you want action on both sides. No one's going to be betting Tom Nolan at this line, definitely straight up or in parlays like that, because, man, that's just crazy. Like, how steep does it have to be, or how high does Alex Reyes have to get for you to bet on him? But I'm telling you right now, do not bet on Alex Reyes because he will lose this fight. He will get knocked out in this fight. Alex Reyes fights like once every 3.5 years. He fought Mike Perry, I think it was like something crazy like 7 years ago, and he came back, had a huge long layoff, had a really bad health problem, something with his back, I believe, or his spine. Alex Reyes, that is. And he came back against Charlie Campbell, which was not a great decision in my opinion. He got viciously knocked out in that fight. And then now they're giving him another guy who has very good power, man. So Tom Nolan's been finishing all of his opponents, really good power on the feet, and he can really hurt anybody at any moment in their fight. And to me, this seems like a clear setup fight, man. Sometimes the UFC is a little bit dirty, and they kind of feed guys to get crushed, and this kind of feels like that moment. I really don't think that Alex Reyes should be in the UFC. He's 37 years old, has 2 fights in the last 7 years, has been knocked out twice in a row. I mean, give me Tom Nolan, man. They are setting up Alex Reyes to lose this fight, get paid, get cut from the UFC, and never be in the UFC again. So give me Tom Nolan via knockout in the very first round. And then up next, we have Song Kenan taking on Ricky Glenn. Song Kenan comes in with a 21-8 record, and he is currently minus 180 on the money line, while Ricky Glenn comes in with a 22-8-2 record, and he is currently plus 150. Now, this fight comes down to, well, first of all, Ricky Glenn's going up to 170 for this fight. This will be at welterweight. Ricky Glenn normally fights at 155, and he's going up now. And Song Kenan, in my opinion, should be able to hurt Glenn in this fight. He's a little bit low output at times. Song Kenan, at least in my opinion, his claim to fame is, hurting Ian Gary with that check left hook, and then end up getting worked the rest of that fight. But he does have decent power on his shots. He does have, decent forward pressure. And I feel like Ricky Glenn just isn't the level of striker as Song Kenan. I feel like Ricky Glenn's going to be looking to take down Kenan in this fight. He's going to be looking to wrestle Kenan in this fight and try to submit him in this fight. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that Song Kenan can stay on his feet, get separation, and really win the minutes throughout the fight in this fight. So give me Song Kenan to win this fight. I actually think that he will hurt Glenn in this fight, but I don't know if he's going to put him away. Glenn's getting up there in age. Both these guys are actually 34 years old versus 35. And I mean, I've just seen Ricky Glenn hurt way too much recently. The tape's not that great, man. This guy's getting rocked all over the place. He's reacting to shots bad. I think he's, I know he's only 35, but in fight years, he's way older than that. Give me Song Kenan. Give me Song Kenan via second round knockout. In the very first fight of the night, we have a banger fight, in my opinion. We have UFC debutant Stewart Nicoll versus Jesus Aguilar. Like I said, Stewart Nicoll making his UFC debut. He comes in with a 8-0 record, currently minus 225 on the money line, while Jesus Aguilar comes in with a 10-2 record, and he is currently plus 185. So when I taped this fight, I figured that Aguilar would be a small underdog. I did not expect Stewart Nicoll to be this big of a favorite, because I could see Aguilar making this fight close. So I'll start with the guy making his debut, and Stewart Nicoll right here on the left side of the screen. No picture, not a lot of stats, because like I said, he's making his debut. This will be his first fight in the UFC. But he's a good prospect, man. This guy is a very good relentless grappler, very good ground and pound, very good cage wrestling as well. What I really like about him is his ability to take the back from the cage while they're standing, make his opponent make a mistake, and from there, he is not letting go, man. Once this guy, Stewart Nicoll, wraps his hands and locks those hands on his opponents, man, he's taking them for rides. It's kind of crazy. And he has very vicious, very deadly, very effective ground and pound when he does get guys down, which is very good to see, man. He's not just, laying, trying to tire the guy out, trying to zap his energy. He's there to do damage when he's grappling. And on the feet, he's not bad either, man. He has a very good 1-2, very quick right hand, and a lot of forward pressure, man. Stewart Nicoll is a bit of a showboat. He'll land a punch and then stick his hands out, stick his tongue out, and kind of point to the crowd. He's a showman for sure. He's a very good fighter, good athlete, really young. His level of competition isn't the best. I will say that. He's 8-0. I watched, I think his last 5 fights, and the guys he's fighting aren't the best. I'll 100% admit that as well. And one thing I really noticed about Stewart Nicoll in his fights, at least his tape was that his most recent promotion he's fighting in, man, the cage looks tiny. It looks smaller than the Apex cage. The cage is super small, right? So in my opinion, that really helps Stewart Nicoll's game, because he does well at getting guys on the warning track. He pressures you onto the warning track, and from there, that's when he shoots his takedowns. And from there, he's really working you against the cage. And from there, gets you down. And from there, grounds and pound and finishes you. And now he's undefeated, right? But the bigger cage, the bigger octagon, I do wonder how that's going to affect him in this fight. I do obviously still expect him to grapple in this fight, try to take down Aguilar in this fight, but I do wonder just the overall size of the cage, how that will affect someone like Stewart Nicoll, who in my opinion looked to be fighting in a very small cage, which helped him in his style of fighting, on the regional scene. So on the other side, we have Jesus Aguilar, the UFC vet. He's 2-1 in the UFC, I believe 3-1 if you count the Dana White Contender Series. And the thing with him is that in his last fight, I thought he lost. He got a decision win over Mateusz Mendonca, and he was taken down quite easily in this fight. And I feel like that's a big red flag. I mean, some of the entries on those takedowns from Mateusz were hella slow. Man, they were really slow, very basic double legs. And Aguilar has one thing that I really don't like, is he jumps guillotine, right? So he jumps guillotine, ends up on bottom if he doesn't get it. I will say it's dangerous, man. Hey, that's why I think he can make it a little bit interesting in this fight. Aguilar's guillotine is dangerous for him. Like, usually I'm against guys doing that, or fighters in general doing that, but for Jesus, he actually does hit quite a few. He can hit them from guys shooting in takedowns. He can shoot them from the clinch, like jump the guillotine from the clinch. Like, he's okay with jumping guillotine and ending up on bottom, but I just feel like that's just low fight IQ at times. And against someone like Stewart Nicoll, if he doesn't get it, he's definitely like gonna be in a bad spot, because Stewart Nicoll has very dangerous ground and pound, and I feel like he's gonna make Jesus Aguilar pay if he does jump guillotine. And like I said, Mateusz Mendonça in his most recent fight was landing takedowns quite easily on Aguilar. But Aguilar does have, some pretty decent striking. One thing that's funny about Aguilar is that he has the shortest reach in the UFC. This guy's arms are tiny. He has little tiny alligator arms. But he does have a weird frame for the division. He's kind of bulky up top, has really big chest, really big arms, a lot of muscle on the guy, pretty bulked up. Whereas Stewart Nicoll does seem to be a little bit smaller than his opponents. So it will be interesting to see if he doesn't have as much success, ragdolling, Aguilar as he's used to in, on the regional scene. It happens often, man. When guys are undefeated on the regional scene, they're finishing everybody quick, no resistance at all, just crushing through guys. And then they go to even somewhere like Dana White's Contender Series, and then they win there, and then they go to the UFC. We see that jump to the UFC caliber of opponents. We see the younger guys, the guys like in this case Stewart Nicoll, start to go to decision more. I mean, we saw with Jack Jenkins. Jack Jenkins was finishing everybody on the regional scene, gets in the UFC, and starts going to decision. So it's hard to, to really know for sure how Stewart Nicoll will look in this fight. His ability to finish probably won't be as high as it normally is, because I do think that Jesus Aguilar has enough defensive grappling, enough awareness on the mat to give him problems. But just ultimately, I do think that Nicoll will be able to implement his grappling, implement his game plan, and really control Aguilar for moments in this fight and really win a decision. So my pick for that fight, the opening fight of the night, will be Stewart Nicoll via decision. A lot of live underdogs, a lot of crazy wide lines this week, guys, but I do have one bet, and that's DRICUS Du Plessis, 1 unit at plus 100. So good luck with your bets, guys. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think about the video. Who do you have winning this main event? Who do you think is going to be the real African champion in the UFC? Good luck on your bets, man. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.